When was the last time you received performance feedback after an action, after a sales meeting, after a sales call? Not a performance review, not a formalized process, but performance feedback. Think about it. Most people have to go back into the memory banks for that. That's crazy if you think about it. Every elite athlete has a coach. Why do they have a coach? Because those coaches are fine-tuning these little performance elements: nutrition, sleep, stretching, and then pick your sport. If it's basketball, shooting, passing, all of those sorts of things. But it's layer upon layer of these finely tuned disciplines. That's why elite athletes have multiple coaches, nutritionists, people around them to fine tune these granular disciplines to make them even higher performers. Why don't we have this as salespeople? It's nuts if you stop and think about it. We need a performance feedback model that we use on each other, sideways, down from boss to employee, employee to boss, yes, upward feedback too. But most often, and it's sort of striking to say this out loud, most often our companies do not have a feedback model. And if they have one, which is rare, they don't use it. What they do use is what larger companies refer to as an annual performance review. And look, I'm not picking on larger companies. I've been part of larger companies like IBM, wonderful corporations, and they have to do an annual performance review. But folks, let's call it what it is. It's an annual compensation review. It's not about performance. When I think about performance as a salesperson, as a sales leader, as an entrepreneur, as a teacher, whatever hat that I happen to be wearing, I need feedback now. I need people to give me, walk out of an hour sales meeting and have someone who I trust and respect say, Craig, here's some things you did well, here's some things you didn't do well. There's a very powerful feedback model that's incredibly simple that I like to think about and propose for exactly these sorts of situations. Day by day, hour by hour performance feedback such that we all become elite athletes. It works like this. The first thing we do, so we get out of a meeting, my colleague Susan and I, and we get in the back of an Uber and we're heading back to the office, and Susan says, Craig, let's do feedback. In that meeting just now with the customer, Justin, what's one thing you think you did well? And I say, and I'm making this up, I say, Susan, I think, you asked me to be very prepared for the meeting, and I think we were prepared. We had our agenda, we had our purpose benefit check. I thought we flowed through the meeting well because we were prepared. And she says, great. Here's one thing I think you did well. I thought that you asked a lot of really good impact questions. You asked better than average questions. I know that, Craig, because a couple times during the meeting, Justin actually stopped and went, it's a good question, let me think about that. And I know in that moment he was processing your really good impact question, so I like that you did that. Now, Craig, Susan says, in that meeting just now with Justin, what's one thing you would do differently? And I say, Susan, I would have closed more strongly. And she says, what does that mean? And she said, well, I say to Susan, well, I kind of wasn't paying attention to time. We sort of ran out of time, and we sort of shuffled at the end. I got up and said, Justin, we're out of time. Thanks so much for your time. And we were gracious on the thank you, but we didn't do action items. We didn't do next steps. We didn't do follow through. We didn't close crisply. Susan says to Craig, great, I agree. Here's one thing I think you should do differently. I think when Justin's colleague walked in 20 minutes after the meeting started, we knew he was going to be late. But when he walked in, you just stayed focused on Justin, when a really good skill and discipline of selling, Craig, would have been to look at that person, welcome him to the meeting, say, hey, let me give you a 30-second recap of where we've been, and then feather it right back to the meeting. I think that would have been a much more appropriate thing to do than what you did, is just stay focused on Justin and kind of ignored that he was in the room. Full stop. Back of the Uber, that's feedback. Nothing more fancy, mysterious, magical than that. That's all it is. That is what elite athletes have every single day. Think about the model. What's one thing you did well? Here's one thing I think you did well. What's one thing you would do differently? Here's one thing I think you should do differently. Think about these two columns. The reason I'm portraying these in columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, did wells, do differentlys, is that this left column builds confidence, this right column builds skill. You cannot build my skill until you build my confidence. That's why most performance feedback models either are unused or they don't work, is because you have to open me up to the possibility of a did well, even though it might be major or minor, and you have to give me a do differently. This is a critical step in all selling, and it's an absolutely critical step in team selling. When Susan and I are together in front of Justin, we walk out, and that follow-through phase of the team selling for impact model, the first thing that happens is feedback. It's a gift we give each other, but we have to know how to do it. Use the model, you will directly benefit from it.